Well, well, well. Baby's first Japanese auction import. There's a very good reason I've got this particular Japanese issue Sanyo miniature boombox, and although I'm recording this right now at the end of January, I won't be putting this out until after the middle of March. This is something that I've imported along with a couple of other bits from Japanese auctions via a proxy service, and the destination of this from Japan to me in the UK will end up in Berlin because it's going to a friend for his birthday party. I'm going to restore it. He doesn't know about it. He probably wonders why I haven't spoken to him much about things that I do up and stuff and things that I buy online and whatnot for a while. I've been keeping this quiet. This has been in the planning for a bit. This lovely little Sanyo boombox is part of the U4 range, which in the Japanese range, where this went on for quite a few years, always had this little dog as a kind of icon of this series. I'm not exactly sure why, but I'm going to guess it was because the sausage dog, being sort of small and long, was kind of an icon for something like this, which is kind of small and long as well. I have a real fascination, long story short, with the differences between the way that technology was marketed and the way that some of that marketing influenced design in Eastern markets, particularly in Japan, versus the way they influenced and directed technologies in the West. There's a kind of masculine emphasis across a variation of Western aesthetics and styles, whereas in the East I don't think that was as prevalent. If you stuck a little dog on something that you would have marketed and sold in the West, chances are it would have been sold to children, whereas although there's a definite youth market push in Japan, for example, it's not a children's product to me, as far as I can tell. I'm not an expert on that. There's a few questions I would love to pose to experts in that field because it really fascinates me. Not only do I have the boombox itself, via a separate auction I managed to get two matching Sanyo cassettes, blank cassettes, that are in the most incredible condition. Bearing in mind this is from 1984 and the cassettes are from around about the same time, and again they've got this kind of emphasis on fun youth market design, which you just wouldn't have seen in a Western product. It really fascinates me, and I think this will be a really fun little present for him. He happened to mention just before Christmas, and it was just before Christmas, he'd got a couple of cassettes he wanted to play, but he'd got no cassette player. Frustratingly, it was so close to Christmas I couldn't do anything about it at the time, and I tried to get a Walkman, and that kind of all went wrong, and this little Sanyo was plan B. So it's this that we're going with. I think my camera's diving ever so slightly, so this may be moving out of shot. It's hard to get in shot because I don't have a lot of height on my bench to mount the camera from. But yeah, so I'm going to start taking this apart. The beauty of this particular model is that it takes a DC 9-volt barrel jack input on the side. It doesn't have a transformer, a mains transformer built in, so we don't have to worry about foreign voltages, whether it's coming or going. It's going to be fine, so I will source a European 9-volt positive center adapter for this to ship with it when it goes to him. For now, I'll be running it on my bench power supply. Haven't powered anything up yet. It's pretty scruffy. It came with a... Here it is. It came with a battery, one battery inside it, even though it takes 6. I love the little, I'm not sure if that can be seen, but it's got like a little woodpecker on the front. If I'm reading this right, the expiry date on that battery is June 1992. Could be manufacturing date, but either way, yeah, there was one ancient battery. Makes me wonder where this has been, because there's something very time capsule-y about it. It's just really fascinating to me. It arrived today, it took a week to get to me. So, and luckily, I'm rambling so much on this first part, I know. Luckily, I found someone in Japan who did a full restoration on the exact same model and put the whole thing in a blog. So before I even got this, I was able to read through that and just look at his pictures, loosely translate what he'd done, and see that it was going to be feasible, and see that it was actually quite nicely built inside. Let's get it apart. Yes, one thing I forgot to mention, well, I did mention there was a horrible leaky battery. The actual battery inside has left some damage from the leak. It's not too bad. I will try and clean this up and make it possible to use it on batteries, but that won't be my primary concern. Amazingly, the sponge on the back of the battery compartment, perfectly fine. Good old Sanyo, he always uses good stuff. So, yeah, looks like all the screws out the back are going to have to come out. I'll pull all the knobs off, pop them in the ultrasonic cleaner, and see what we're going to find inside this. I put some gloves on because with it having a battery leak and it being kind of mucky when I got it, and the age of that battery, I don't know what I'm going to find inside this. So I think I'm going to try pulling all the controls off first. Chrome underneath is nice and clean, so I'm hopeful it'll wash up okay. And the antenna as well looks really crusty, but if I pull it out, I don't know if you can really see that, but it exposes a really clean bit. So I think it's just been sat for a long time. And yes, some corrosion on the chrome that I hope I can clean. Some yellowing if you compare the bottom. It's interesting, I'm not sure. It has a kind of metallic finish that may not come across on the camera at all. I didn't notice it on the pictures. It has a kind of white metallic finish, and I'm not sure if that's in paint or if it's actually in the plastic. I might have to get a little bit of alcohol or something like just on the bottom where it can't be seen, and just see if any paint comes off it. You could argue for retro brighting it being, plastic if you wanted to. I'm not going to do that in this case. It concerns me if I did that I'd take off the best part. I'm going to leave it colour wise as it is, but it's obviously going to get a real clean polish and wash. New belts and all that good stuff. Screws are clicking, which is a good sign. So it's never been opened. Rather rusty one down in the Alright, so there's an antenna connector, a little bit like Hitachi's. Oh, look at that battery spring, good lord. Oh yes, there's some rust around that switch there. What's that switch for? What's that for? Oh, it's the band select switch. Look at that. Okay. Looks like something was hidden. Right, so this should just pull off. That just connects to the FM aerial. Yep, there we go. The back's free. The back's not too bad actually. Oh, we've got a date. We've got a date. 25th. This is a moulding date. 25th of December 1983. Christmas Day 1983. No way. 25th of December 83. How about that? I noticed there's some rust on the antenna connector. So the antenna might have to come out and I might have to de-rust that and just check the connection there, because I want the radio to work. A little bit of rubber there. Wherever that went, that's probably a piece of belt. Oh yes, I can already see bits of belt around the flywheel, so yes, that was to be expected. I think there's only 3 belts in these. Counter belt on the front, and I think there's 2 mechanism belts on the back. Good grief, that's scary. Oh yeah, that's had it. So, oh yeah, there we go. So that spring I'm definitely going to have to replace. It looks like if I can de-rust it, it may de-solder and pull out of that slot. The other 2 are not too bad, but that one's not too great. So some dust bunnies. Spring. Oh no! Look at that. Done for. So yeah, we'll try and do something with that spring. Oh, there's another screw there. Ah, okay, so that connects the sub chassis to the well, the chassis really to the front. So I need to take that screw out. So that's probably going to be short as well. No, that's medium length. It's got a flat base on it. But again, it's unique. So that should, yeah, so the chassis now feels loose. Will that now come out completely? Is there anything else? Sorry, that's off shot. There's a connector there. Looks like that can be removed. That's from, by the looks of it, the speakers. Yep, there we go. So the 3-pin connector there. We've a 4-pin connector there, but that might be from the tape deck, so I think that has to come out. Oh my lord, that was tough. I just kind of had to wrench it, which made the most awful sound. I'm finding bits of this gooey belt everywhere, and it's gone everywhere. I'm going to have to clean my mat because it's gone all over the front. See at the top there, so everything obviously is going to have to be washed anyway. But I'm going to have to take these speakers and this wiring harness out. So there's a bit of black tape there that just holds the speaker wires. They thread underneath the screw posts, and we've also got piezo transducers for the tweeters. Do you know, I think if I remember right, they might not come out. Sure what to do about those, I don't think. Right, let's get these speakers removed. So I've got 3 wings on each one. And the grills have come out as well. Okay, so the wires for the piezo transducers, which I don't think are removable. I'm seeing heat stakes there, so I think they're fitted from the front and then heat staked in. I don't think they're removable, so They're nice, solid looking speakers though for a small unit. Carefully put that back there. I think I'm going to have to desolder the tiny wires for the piezos. Now luckily the colours match. What I'm going to do is just I'm going to break them off. Just like that. They're very fine wire. I'm going to strip and resolder them to attach them, so just break them off. This side goes under this bit of tape here. I can't get the leverage to break that, so I'm going to have to just cut that one. Tape and pop the speakers out. I'm just going to pop them down. The date code in this side is the 17th of January 1984. And the date on the back of the motor is in the Japanese calendar, so 59 will be 1984, so that's 6th of January 1984. You can see on the front it's counterbelt, that's no good. That can come straight off. Well, actually, yeah, it's misshapen, but it's not sticky, but evidently the other belts were somewhere, so yeah, it's a pretty neat little mechanism actually. We've even got a date on the mechanism. Is that 30th? 30th of January. Oh, we've got 8403 on that chip there. So yeah, it's looking like around about January 1984. But that back part being moulded on Christmas Day is it's quite something. So I think these pull off. Yes, it's chrome levers. They just pull off. They can go in the wash. And be careful of the dial cord. There's a little bit of paint missing on the silver of the dial there. I'm not sure it's visible through the window at the top, but I might at the end just get a little bit of silver paint just to touch it up perhaps. Yeah, it all looks a bit gross, so it also needs a good clean. I think next thing is I'll get the case washed. Change these gloves, get the case washed. Yes, I have to confess I've been giving this a wash and everything off camera. I mean, I've done one video where you've seen me put one of these in the sink. It's no different. It's had a good wash in soapy water, and then I've gone around and done some detailing with Brasso and isopropyl alcohol. One slightly alarming bit was on this metal front panel here, there's kind of two stripes of white paint, which looking at the colour on the bottom would have been probably a closer match to the actual case colour. It has yellowed quite a bit, but I'm going to, as I say, leave it the way it is. But I was worried about alcohol on this because I thought it could take the paint off, but it had got a lot of that rubber gunk all over it, and when I just sort of carefully tried a little bit of the alcohol, it seemed to take this sort of coating off, and I thought, oh god, is that the paint? No, it wasn't. It was just like a horrible smeary kind of layer of tar over the top, and I went right over it, and it was really quite spectacular how that came up. That looks and feels really good now. I was just seeing it wipe it off with the alcohol on the cotton bud. So yeah, you know, there's a few scrapes and things I can't. The pitting on these is too severe for me to get them as good as this, for example. It's weird that it's mainly on one side. Would that have been where the battery would have been? I don't know, but yeah, the chrome's quite heavily pitted without undoing all these heat stakes and figuring out a way of re-gluing it or whatever without destroying it in the first place. It's not worth it. It is what it is. It's much better than it was, but it would have to be recoated, you know, in order to get it perfect. But we're not going to get it perfect, we're just going to get it as good as it can be. Taking a couple of scuffs out the door with Brasso, there's just a couple of little ones left to do, and the top I think will get a second pass. Nothing majorly wrong with it really. I love this eject mechanism on the back, actually the front case, and the actual soft eject mechanism here built into the front of the case. That being in the water doesn't seem to have caused a problem. It just feels really nice. It's going to be a bit of a struggle to get these dry inside the case, inside the tape door, sorry. And there's a little bit of paint come off there that I might be able to touch up. I'm not going to go crazy, but yeah, it's coming up. It's coming up really nice. Definitely deserves it. Back on this again, and all the controls have been through the ultrasonic cleaner and had a bit of a plastic polish. They're not perfect. Definitely some of the pitting on this around the chrome on the body and on the controls has actually taken out little bits of the coating rather than it sort of being on top, like those Hitachi's for example that are cleaned up. So yeah, they're not perfect, but it is what it is. They're a lot cleaner, they're a lot less cloudy than they were before, so it's all a good start. Let's get the transport out then. It's quite a nifty little transport, this. I think it's soft touch controls, as it advertises on the front, are operated by a cam mechanism. So the actual dropping of the head, all this block here, is driven by a cam that's part of the flywheel assembly. So it's powered from the motor, because if you just press which one's play? That one's play. Just press play down, see nothing actually moves, nothing happens. That's pause. So yeah, I think it's driven by the motor and the belt. The only downside with mechanisms like this is if it were to fail, if the belt were to fail while the head is down, you quite often would have no way of getting the head back up. So your tape would get stuck in, and then you can't eject it. And sometimes with certain decks that you can't eject, you can't get the back off. So it's kind of catch-22. You've got to eject it, but you can't. You've got to get in there to release the cam to get the head block back up to eject it, but you can't. So I think on this one it's not critical if you can't eject the front, I don't think. But yeah, I wouldn't want to end up in that situation. So I believe, according to that blog that I mentioned earlier, you have to desolder a couple of motor wires. There's no other way of getting this out without doing some desoldering. We'll see if that's the case. It's only just the positive and ground for the motor. Things don't want to come out, do they? A couple of things I've just done while I was having a little mess around. I took the counter off, and the counter's got a slightly shorter screw than the rest of the screws in the transport. So that goes through there, through the sort of frame on the motor. There's also here, just sort of tucked away under this APSS board, I think they call it, same as DPRS on the or DRPS rather, on the Hitachis is a little cable retainer here. I'm actually going to unscrew that. That's got a little silver screw in the top there. Let's see if that might be, that's got a really small screw. That might be in the way a bit. See if that frees anything up. It's sort of free on one side, not on the other, and I'm not sure what I've missed. I'm just going to keep pressing that play button. It's going to get really frustrating. It's kind of weird, the pause button being here. You'd think it would be on the end, or normally stop and pause. The opposite way around. It's really odd. But yeah, I'm not certain what's still holding this. Oh, I forgot to mention, I've removed a screw here as well on this board, because that seemed to bolt to stand off on the transport there. So I wonder if it's... There's a kind of tie here and a plug here. I wonder if it's a case of removing this board. What holds that board on? Oh, actually no. I just had to kind of free up a little bit of space, but there is a bit of a cable tangle going on. Some blue wiring, I don't know if that's visible, yeah, just there. Some blue wiring that goes to a solenoid on the back, and that's kind of looped around a wire here. It looks like there's some plugs from the bottom of the tuner board here, so I think I might have to undo that. It's not so easy. Feed that around, just noting where it goes. That goes on there like that. Okay, so that goes like that, and that looks like that would allow the transport to come out. Okay, that's a little better. Still some wiring, and yeah, I can see the remnants of bits of belt. Get this a little closer for you. There we go. So I'm trying not to just wrench on this, because I can see wiring is really what's kind of holding everything together. And obviously I've got to get this back in. So we've got a black wire there that's screwed to a couple of ground tabs. It goes down here somewhere, and these are wires that are soldered, so I can't just wrench them straight out. And bits of this have been going all over the bench. You probably notice I've got rid of the towel, well, the bath mat rather, because it went all over that and then kind of sticks in the fibres. So interesting, this won't really turn, so that feels like that's part of the cam assembly perhaps. I'm just trying to get as much of this out as I can first, then I'll wash my hands. Just the lumps of it. See, it's all around the flywheel as well. It's kind of weird, it is holding together, but if you touch it, it is gluey. I can see chunks of it falling down there. And there's more in the flywheel. I don't think, if I get the bulk of this out, the cleanup of this shouldn't be too bad, but it's getting the access to it. This transport should definitely come out. I think it should do more than just open up a little bit like this. I think it's just wiring that that's trapping us in a little bit. And actually this board, just push that back a touch. Yeah, so we've got a bit of a tangle going on here. Where this cable retainer is sort of twisted around, it's tying everything together, which is all well and good. But I need to get things to separate. Take that out, not mixing it with the belt. There we go. Just really pulling it. Actually, just turning that over like that is pretty good access. I might not have to desolder anything. Now get to the stuff that's left on the motor. Gross. I think I should be able to work like this if I'm careful and twist it back into position when I'm done. Don't think I have to desolder anything. So I've got lots of bits of dust and all this gunk to get off next, so I'm going to wash my hands and get some gloves on, which I should have done to begin with, and get cleaning. So there I was doing all the cleaning, thinking, alright, I think I've got it all, as much as I'll get, I'm happy. If you look right in the middle of the shot, I've realised that there's another sub pulley underneath the flywheel. It's got a big chunk of melted belt on it. So I almost missed that one. But yeah, you can see it just there, it's got the torch on it. So I can kind of get to that. I might have to pull the flywheel out. I know it's possible, because again, the guy who's done this blog definitely got the flywheel out of his. But yeah, I almost missed that. Inevitable job then is working out how to get this flywheel off, and I think these 3 screws, 2 of which have ground straps, would loosen this back plate. Let's take these 2 out. Let's just actually just loosen them first and just see if it feels. Oh yeah, I can actually see that coming off. So maybe loosen these. Does that feel like it? Get that plate out. Yeah, I think it would. Yeah, so that would be the way to get the belt in if you didn't have to completely remove the flywheel. Okay, so the short brass screws there fit into plastic posts. You must note as well the one that I took out the tape mechanism where it's got the metal standoff here. That's a machine screw with a fine thread because it goes into a metal binding post. Now something's just fallen off the front here. The lever has fallen off the front and it landed that way. There's also quite a complex mechanism going on there somewhere that is attached to this bracket and the spring and the solenoid. That makes me reluctant to try and remove the entire thing, but that may not be necessary. I think there might be enough play in that. Let me take the screw out. I've got to work out, they match. I've got to work out why that bracket came off and where it came from. It feels like it's part of the pause mechanism. So we'll have to look back at, this is why I do videos. I have to look back at that. There's a small pressure ring on the front of the capstan. I just removed. I really got to find somewhere to put that. So you can lay that back down. There's a gear on it as well. It's not quite enough to remove it. What is that connected to? Will it just come out like that? Let's take this out and see. Obviously the outside, oh. I just need to get it to move enough. Go around any further. Oh, look at that. We've got it. Oh, beautiful. So, yeah, at least now I can get under this and clean this a little better. Can probably oil the shaft as well when I've cleaned it. I need to not lose that tiny snap ring there, so I better get a little Ziploc bag, I think, and put these bits and pieces in and refer back to the video footage to remember which screw went where. Get it on the end of there. That Ziploc bag. There we go. Just loitering around here, I just noticed this tiny plastic washer that's probably come off the back. I'm really glad I spotted that. It's probably come off the back of where the flywheel goes in. I'm just trying to suss this out. I think to actually get a belt on, you have to keep in mind that the belt has got to go obviously around the flywheel underneath this, but then it's got to come to the motor pulley over the top of this. So let me just push that a little further in so you can see. So you've got to get that belt wrapped around this that way, so that you can have one half of it underneath, one half of it over the top. There's no way to do that without either desoldering the motor and threading it over the top of the motor, or removing the motor with these 3 screws, threading it over this plate and screwing the motor back on, or undoing it from this end, but this looks messier by far because there's all this spring, and in fact now that won't work because there's wires going into the solenoid there. So I think realistically the only way to do it is, yeah, to remove the motor from this side and then slide the belt over and then screw the motor back in, which is not too bad. But yeah, it screwed my head up for a moment there trying to work that one out. I'm going to put this tiny plastic washer in this bag before I lose it. Also, actually looking down in there, I can see another massive piece of belt. I'm just finding bits of it everywhere, and lots of dust around the bottom of a switch. Yeah, I will have a closer inspection of that. It's a little bit like that last Sanyo that I did, where I just kept finding bits of it. It's okay. Well, there can be no debate that is a clean flywheel. what I'd noticed is that kind of the way the belt had kind of half stuck to this, so half of it was exposed and half of it had a belt stuck to it. The parts where the belts had been, there was a kind of oxide left behind that was almost sort of chalky and had a really different feel to the rest of the wheel that was clean. And I was concerned that as the belt exits and enters the wheel, it would cause the belt to pull and vibrate. So I ended up actually going around it with some Brasso, which did seem to cut into that stuff straight away, and the wadding went black straight away. And then I bunged it in the ultrasonic cleaner for 10 minutes. And then I think I'll just give it a final clean with some alcohol, but that's so much better. It's got some of the gunk out of the gear as well. There's a tiny bit of play in that gear, but I think there's supposed to be, because of the way this is shaped. But that's come up so much better. It's just as well really that I did spot underneath. There was still some muck inside it. I'm really pleased with that. So yeah, I'm going to give that a final clean with alcohol, get a little bit of oil on the spindle, put that little plastic washer back in place, pop this in. Even if I'm not ready to get the belt back on it, I want it back in that bushing before I forget to put that little plastic washer in. But I'm dead chuffed with how that's come up. It feels much better now. Okay, so there's the tiny plastic washer. Now this isn't perfectly level, so let's try and prop this up with something. Oh, look at that. I've got some spindle oil here that came from a Revox tape machine repair kit actually. See if I can get this back in. Oh, is it meshing properly with those gears? There's something in this cam mechanism I mentioned earlier that's making it kind of spring back like that, because if I keep turning it around it will click. There we go. So that feels pretty decent. And then when it's together, I'm going to have to work out belt sizes. So we have motor to flywheel here, and then the little sub pulley underneath here goes to this pulley. So I have those two to work out. I'm going to attempt to do a trick with dental floss to see if we can measure this belts that we're going to need. This is going to be tricky. About 19.5 centimetres. I'm not going to do any fancy maths, I'm just going to use my calculator with an online site. So the circumference was 19.5. It gives us a diameter of 6.2 centimetres, so around a 62mm belt. And it's probably at least a 1mm. It's it looked like quite a chunky belt that came off there. It might be 1.5mm. So I'll make some notes here. So this second one's going to be difficult to do, because how am I going to know that it will be wrapped around the right pulley? Yeah, because that's pulling the flywheel, so I'm pretty sure. Yes, it's right. I can see the dental flosses around it. I'd say about 152 millimeters. 48.6, so about 48 millimeters. Alright, the sun's out, but I think it's quickly going down. I hope that doesn't mess up the exposure too much. I have belts. Although I've removed it again at the minute, I did have to actually put the transport back in and put the counter back in order to measure that front belt, because I completely forgot to do that. But I've got some belts here. Hopefully they are going to fit, because I had to, as you saw, measure them with dental floss. So I did that twice just to make sure my measurements were right. They didn't change, and they didn't. I have had a power in this. I've not actually powered it up at all until this point, just to check that the motor did actually work, and it does. So I'm just going to move this test lead that I made out of the way. And also that little bit that fell off the front, that bracket, I worked out what it was. It's the bracket for the eject mechanism that actually presses that little lever on the front panel that points that way. So the reason it came off is because this bracket that covers up the flywheel and holds the motor, that little bracket that came off, it slides into a little sort of key slot there. If you can see, there's a little slot there, and then there's just a little kind of stub that sticks out there that acts like an axle for that bracket to go on. So in order to get that back on, I've got to loosen this bracket again, which I will do anyway because I've got to fit the belt. Pop it on the little axle, and then just kind of manoeuvre it all into place. And it's really just held in place by literally being pinned in place by each of these things. It can't go anywhere once it's on, but because I'd removed this bracket, it fell off. So it wasn't a big problem. It's less daunting when I went and looked at pictures and just realised what was going on. So I'm going to desolder these motor wires. I'm going to try and do it without disturbing this little capacitor on the back. Positive and negative markings on the motor case, and the wires are red for positive, and the shield is just there. It's come off already. Look, the shield is just a bare shield for the negative, so it should be fine. So there we go. That was easy enough. So pop them to one side. The belts are on, at least temporarily, and I've just hooked my power supply up to the motor. I actually put power to the main unit, measured the voltage coming off the motor wires. It was about 8.5 volts, so I've set my bench power supply the same, just put it across the motor just to check. My measurements are a bit off with these belts. I wondered if that would be the case. The motor one is a little bit slack, but I think I might get away with it. The one around the white pulley, although it's kind of working, feels like it's way off. That's my fault. I did wonder if from my measurements I should come down a bit. I wondered about not doing, because they're quite thick belts. I think I should have come down. I think I'm going to have to reorder that one. That's my fault. Anyway, when I put the power onto the motor, what I was getting at first was the stop button kept clicking down, kept pressing itself. And I noticed this earlier. When I first got this, the buttons, the soft touch buttons, would latch, but now they don't. If I press play, the head block will drop, but it won't latch. When I let go, nothing will latch. Everything works, and I don't know what cleared in this stop button. It was pulling itself down. It's not doing it now. But everything does seem to work, as I say, if I hold it down. Interesting, even the pause control is actually part of that cam mechanism. So it's quite a nifty mechanism, but there's something weird with it not latching. I'm not sure if it's anything to do with that piece there that isn't attached. Not sure. Maybe it could be. Maybe I need to take another look at that. But yeah, I don't know. It was like something was out of sync, and this just kept pushing down. And obviously, just to turn that off, I've just got power straight across the motor here, so it's ignoring the leaf switches and everything. So the motor obviously wouldn't continue to run when it stopped, But yeah, I want to look into this before I sort anything further with belts. I want to look into this issue with it not latching, because I want to make sure obviously mechanically it's right before I spend the money reordering any belts, because it did work when I first got it. So this little piece seems to go kind of somewhere around here, and there's a little bit here that goes through the little slot. I think I'll have to unscrew, at least loosen a bit this part at the back again to get this back on. But I'm wondering if that's something to do with it not latching, because I haven't changed anything else. But it just, the buttons don't latch like they first did. Just to show the fit of the belts, you can see that the motor belt's alright really, but you can probably see this one's wobbling around. That's really floppy, so that needs to come down at least one size. As I say, the motor belt, yeah, a bit, but I think I'll probably get away with that. I don't know, I might order one size down, but this is definitely not right. Something I have just changed, I'd spotted, there's a little linkage here. It's actually part of the record that was sticking out. It had come off of where it's supposed to be. Just spotted that and hoped that was the issue, but no, it wasn't. So something's still wrong. After some considerable time, I discovered the cause of this lack of button latch. Right in the middle of the shot, you should see a little white peg with a little leaf spring pressed against it. And that leaf spring isn't just flat, it's actually a kind of hook shape. I'm not exactly sure why. I think it's probably to aid assembly, but it makes it a little bit of a weak point. And if it gets ever so slightly bent, that little peg ends up on the other side of the spring, and the spring's just not pressing against anything. It's the pressure on that little peg that holds the latching mechanism in. And it just wasn't, you know, the peg was just pushed past it, and every time I tried to pull it back into place, it would just fly off again. So yeah, it's a weak point, and I had to kind of compare some of my old footage and some of the pictures from that blog I keep mentioning to see the kind of direction in which it was pointing in some of the shots, and it should be pointing straight up towards the buttons, and it wasn't. Mine was just pointing diagonally, so I knew something was wrong. And I've kind of bent it back into shape, I think, as best I can. I had to take the bracket back off, lift the flywheel a little bit to get a bit more access. That eject lever assembly that I put back in earlier has fallen out again, so I've got to do that. But either way, I know I've got to change this belt because it is too slack, and I think I'm probably going to do this one as well. I probably could get away with a flywheel belt, but I think I'm going to go one down for that and maybe two down for this one, because this one's way off. But yeah, if you do take one of these apart, beware of that little leaf spring and that little white peg behind the flywheel. If your buttons don't latch, watch what that is doing. I have a new battery spring. The outer diameter of this one, when I ordered it, was a tiny bit too small to stay in this clip securely, so I had to stretch it a little bit with a couple of pliers. It's not fixed in at the moment. When I pulled the remains of the old one out, there was a couple of bits of glue either side that we used at the factory. I can see at the other side they've done the same. So after I've soldered the wire and pushed it back in, I'm just going to secure that as they did with a little bit of glue, and then if we choose to use this on batteries again, it'll work. So I've done that. I've got some new belts, new belts for the tape deck to see if these fit a bit better this time. So as soon as I can, I'm going to get on with that. Also, forgot to mention, I've cleaned out all that horrible gunk out of the battery compartment on the back casing. It's two big splotches. Now you can see here, because this is kind of hidden, I did try to see if a bit of acetone would shift it. You wouldn't normally use acetone on plastics like this, and this is why. It does cut the top surface of the plastic, and if you go quite deep into it, you do get the original colour. Now obviously I wouldn't want to do that on the outside, so this was a test just to see if it would shift some of the heavier stuff. In the end I actually ended up just using part alcohol, just isopropyl alcohol, and part plastic polish that I use. That did really cut through a lot of it, especially in this bit. So the alcohol was good for getting just any sort of staining off, but the plastics was pretty good for cutting through the thick of it. That's probably, that part notwithstanding, that's probably the best I've ever got, a piece of plastic that's had the residue from battery leakage to come up. So I'm really chuffed with that. Also the antenna's been removed and polished and put back on. That's come up really nicely. So yeah, all this back piece had a wash and a bath, and then that was done, and that was done. I thought this was rusty. I might have mentioned that earlier in the video. It's not rust, it's glue. So when I took the antenna out, the other side, the brass, exposed brass side that contacts this little clip here, was perfect. So if you can see, there's a bit of glue there, and it's actually just glue residue over the top. I don't know why it was glued in if it's got a screw. I also de-rusted that screw that's in there. Yeah, I don't know what the deal was with gluing that in. I haven't, that's just the glue that was left there. Also kind of weird, we've got glue, nothing, heat stake. So time to have a second go at these belts then. So do what I did before, loosen that one and remove this one. There's a couple of other things I've learned about this deck as well that I want to make a point of. And I've done this. Actually, let's just take that off now, make that easier. So if I remember right, this belt that's on is a 62.5mm diameter, and I've gone down to a 60mm. I don't think this belt was far off. I could have almost lived with it, but as I was making an order and the second belt subsequently free postage, I thought let's just get the other and try it. So I'm going to get that one off, and then this one on the pulley underneath. There we go. So that's the old ones. I will keep those because they'll get used for something else. I'm quite happy to keep hold of them. So the small belt we need first. Let's see if I've got it right or not. 5mm difference from diameter, so hopefully it would just be just enough. So see if we can get this one underneath 5mm first. A twist I need to get out, but quick little tool. That feels loads better. 42.5 by diameter by 1.5mm thickness. For that feels so much better. And then let's see the 60mm. Again, we've only got 2.5mm difference here. It wasn't miles out. Now I'm going to do what I did before, which is half of it under the motor. It's a weird arrangement, but that's how we do it, apparently. The other slightly awkward thing about this is that the tension of the belt will pull the bracket kind of out of place a little bit. It's when you actually put the screws back in, it will pull it back in, you see that pulling, so you'll get a little bit more tension. Yeah, that feels perfect. Oh, that's so much better. So before I screw that in properly, I need to put that little eject lever back in. Where did it go? It's floating around somewhere. If you really want to know how to get one of these back together, take that screw out completely. Put that one in but loosely, put that one in but loosely. Gives you just enough play to move and twist this plate here and get that eject clip thing aligned just enough that you can just hold it in place, tighten those down, then put this screw in, if there's too much play in it, like when I had both screws removed and this one loose, as soon as you try and manoeuvre it, that little eject lever will fall straight back out again. It did it to me about 4 times, drove me up the wall. So you have to kind of find a balance between loose enough to get it in, but not too loose that it won't just flop and fall back out. So it's a real balancing act now. I'm going to have to go back at my earlier video and look how these wires were put through these little hooks here exactly to get this right before I fully assemble it. There's also, there's this, isn't there? There's just off shot, there's this 4-wire connector that kind of nestles through all this tangle of wires here in a specific way. So again, I've got to go back to that. And then of course I've got to solder the motor wires. There we go. Got to solder the motor wires back on as well. So, but belts I'm happy with finally. My gut instinct when I ordered them was to go with the 60mm for the main flywheel, which I've ended up with, and it was actually to go for a 45 on the other pulley, and I've ended up going with a 42.5. I ignored that instinct completely and went with the wrong ones at first. So, but you live and learn. It's got 9 volts on the motor again, just to do a quick test. That's going all right. We do have auto stop. Auto stop works. It's latching. That's a good sign. Rewind works. Do we have auto stop and rewind? Don't think so. Oh, interesting. Stop's not. Oh, it is. It's catching on something. It's okay. I thought the stop wasn't working. Loads of torque there. Just the pause. Yep. Okay. And check record. It's going down and then latching. Yes. That's something else I want to mention here. Turn the power off. Get this into shot. The little record prevention lever. If you're not careful with that, it just pulls out. I lost that for like an entire day. Turned it over and went, where's it gone? Did it come with one? Confusingly, that block I keep talking about on one of his photos is missing completely. So I kind of went through a little period of, did it not come with one? Why would it not come with one? And then I found it. And it just kind of pushes in from the front, so it's, again, it's another part that's dead easy to knock out. That little record tab thing on the back that had been knocked out of place before, that I've done the same thing again. So there's a few things on these. This lever thing, if you're not careful, you can knock them out. That still feels really shaky, but it's right. I suppose once it's kind of locked into place by the front door, it should be alright. But there are a few bits on these that if you're not careful, they just fall out and you don't notice. So not the worst to work on, but not the easiest. Just have to take a bit of care with them. The following morning, I'm back to a bench that's a bit of a mess. I actually managed to get the entire transport, everything finished. I've got the counterbelt on, that was perfect, got everything working. I had no audio at all. I put power into the main unit and I had no audio whatsoever. Nothing from the amp. I plugged headphones in, not even a hiss or a pop or anything, which was a bit suspicious. I connected the speakers up and got exactly the same thing. As I was power cycling this yesterday during testing, something weird happened with the synchronization of that cam mechanism in the transport, and it all went out of sync and started making like a grinding noise. And I couldn't get the head block to drop completely. It just wouldn't fully engage, like it was stuck in pause, and I had to strip it all back down, obviously. There's a good moment where I thought, I think this is terminal, and I got really upset about it, because this is, as I probably mentioned, this is supposed to be a surprise birthday present for someone, and this is actually plan B. So the first one didn't work out either, so it just started to feel like this project was cursed, and I thought, this is something I can't fix. When I came back downstairs, I noticed on the side of my bench here, there was this spring, as if it had been put there. It was really weird. I didn't put it there. Apparently my housemate didn't put it there, but it was just sitting there. I'd looked in the mechanism and found out where it had come from. Managed to put it back in. Managed to get the gears back in sync. I had to take all the flywheel out again, and that stupid eject lever. And I got it to work last night, so fingers crossed. When I put it all back together again properly, it will stay working. I don't know what I did. Something got out of sync when I was power cycling. I think I pressed stop, turned the power off. I got it out of sync, and it just went crazy. Back to this fault of no audio. I spent last night going through this. Now, I don't have a service manual for this. There probably is one out there somewhere, but it's likely in Japanese. Very few results you get for these at all. It appeared when I went through this, I got the FM tuner to lock onto a stereo signal because the stereo light was on, and I went through it with my little amplifier and effectively like a signal tracer, and I could tell that we've got an audio signal coming from the FM radio, going through the system, going back out to the preamp, back to the volume control, and back down to the board, and back into the power chip, the power amp chip, which is here, which is an LA 4507 Sanyo part. Got two inputs fine, but I've got absolutely no output directly from the chip. And I've had a look around, and I have found one thing on YouTube. There is a Japanese guy that's done a repair on one of these again, found the same issue that I had, and he seemed to suspect some capacitors. He found some sort of data sheet for that chip, because I could only find one for the 4508, which I think is the same layout but lower power. He found the example circuit and pointed out some capacitors, and I did find a data sheet for that other chip, and it describes 3 capacitors that, in their words, can affect the startup time. There's 2 feedback capacitors and a suppression capacitor for the pop noise when you turn it on. So I did wonder, it's a bit unusual for an amp chip to have no output at all without it being short circuit or running red hot or anything. It's not doing any of those. It's got power, power's stable, nothing's being sort of pulled down that I can see, but there's just nothing at all from headphones or speakers, and nothing from the chip. So he pulls a 330 microfarad capacitor out of his and seems to think that when he does that it comes back to life. It does make sense that the likelihood of an entire chip failing like that is low, but the likelihood of capacitors in its support circuit failing is higher. So it's a bit of a dog to get to, because some of them are under the heat sink on the other side of this board. But I'm going to probe around this, and I'm just going to point out that we do have audio on the input pins. I do have a pin out for this chip, but we don't have anything on the output. And then I think I'm going to have to get this board out. It's kind of loose. I think it's just some of the tight wiring holding it in, and see if we can get some of these caps out and see what it does. Okay, so this is a bit of a lash up, but I've got a capacitor in the end of a clip lead that's going into a little amplifier I've got at the top of my bench, and hopefully you can hear.
Paradise sound like the lapping of the Caribbean Sea.
That is the FM radio, so that's the input to the board. That's directly out of the FM circuit.
P&O Cruises Caribbean Holiday.
So that's left and right channels. And if I touch it to, I think it's this one, bring the volume up, that's the input to the amplifier, so that's one channel, and I think one of these, that's the other. So that's your left and right to the preamp, to the power amp chip, and that should come out one here, absolutely dead, and one here. absolutely dead. So those thicker traces where they just bumped up for the current a little bit, nothing at all. As luck would have it, I have desoldered one leg here of a capacitor. I actually went around a couple, took one leg off and measured across them. There's a cap here which I think is a 1000 microfarad. Struggled to get a measurement across it when it was in circuit. Desoldered one leg, it comes up 1000, it's fine. But this one, where are you, here, which I'd hazard a guess is the same capacitor as the guy in the video took out. I couldn't get a very good measurement across it. When I've desoldered one leg, it doesn't really get any better. It measures 22 ohms in resistance setting, but on capacitance not good. Anyway, I've left it with one leg undone, put the power on, and if you can hear that, it's working. So I reckon that's probably the the pop suppression capacitor that kind of slows down the start up of the chip so that it doesn't pop so much when it comes on, or when you turn the motor on and off. Again, it stops that heavy ripple in the power rail, and it might have gone open. I'm going to take it out completely. Luckily it's not too bad to access. I'm just going to get solder on the end of the gun. It's not too bad to access to get it out. Annoyingly it's got those slightly bent leads. Here it is. You see that? 22 ohm resistor. That would explain. Got the new cap in place. I've had to put it on the back. I think there'll be more than enough clearance, but the heatsink is just in the way. I'd have to completely unscrew it, undo the heatsink, just to try and wiggle it in there. It's not worth it when I think there's plenty of clearance in the way. I will glue this down, but it is running. When you go to reassemble one of these and put the tape transport back in, you see right in the middle of the shot there's a metal lever going through a plastic lug. That plastic lug is the end of the record play switch, the long switch. And it's really important that you get that metal lug through the hole in the end of the switch. Don't just put the transport in so that the lug that's pointing down just sits at the side of the switch. It's fairly common when you've got one of these that little metal lug that's pointing down will push one of these record play switches. In the case of this one, it actually pulls it. It's really easy if you just put the transport just straight on the top to miss the little eyelet there on the switch. And I actually had to sort of push the other end of it because there's another one of these eyelets at the other end of the switch, and I had to put a screwdriver in the other side and push it across, and then jiggle the board a little bit as I lowered the transport down so that that went through and it locked into that little hole. Now this might be a bit of a balancing act. I'm not sure if I'll be able to keep this LED torch in place. Oh, maybe. If I can, as my power on, yes, hold the record tab down and press record. Do you see it pull? If I press stop, it releases again. Now if I press play, see, it doesn't move. It stays in the play position. So if you've got one of these and you've put it back together and it won't record, then you've probably not got that little metal tag there to engage with the little plastic eyelet on the end of the record play switch. Just something I spotted when I put a couple of screws in to check the alignment, and I had to take them back out again and wiggle the board a bit and finagle it in. It should now be okay. got a bit further with the reassembly process, and I've actually been running it for about an hour or so. I did hook up the speakers, and I've checked all the headphone output and everything as well. I ran a CD player into the line in, I ran some cassettes, I recorded a little bit on the cassette, tested the mics. Everything's working really nicely. Got the counter back in, got the belt back on. I have to say, George Formby for a start is not what I've been playing. It's just an old scrap tape. But that's about a 1986-1987 TDK D90, which has been well used. And I tried recording just a little bit from the line in, from the mics, just to make sure it was working. Now, one thing I will say is the background hum and hiss is quite loud. Hard to say whether that's just kind of a condition issue or if it's just the way it was. Obviously there's no more shielding really to go on this. I don't think there's anything in the back panel. All the ground straps and everything are hooked back up, so it's never going to be hi-fi by any stretch, but I have to say, from the recording that I tested, yes, it does the typical kind of boombox auto gain thing, but for a 1986 D90 from the CD player, just with this set to a normal position, it wasn't too shabby, honestly. If you were a teenager in the 80s recording chart radio shows on this, you wouldn't be too hard done by. There's certainly more modern stuff around which does a far worse job than this does. It's kind of got that typical mismatch of balance as well between kind of tape and then radio, and the line input's a bit quiet, but when you record it to tape and then play it back, it's really loud. I'm running the line input from a portable CD player just with a headphone out, so there might be a bit of a mismatch there anyway. Modern line out stuff seems to be really quiet, I'm sure, compared to a lot of older stuff, but you can get around it. I thought I'd noticed at one point that it wasn't recording very strongly on the left channel, but I cleaned the record play switch by tipping it on its side and cleaning it and then activating the switch a few times. When I actually played back what I recorded, it played back fine. So I'm not sure what was going on there. Maybe just something or nothing, but yeah, I've just been running it to make sure it's all okay. It did just stop playing once, but it's not done it again. I think it's on its back. That's not ideal. I'm only doing that to stop the tape falling out. But yeah, it's coming along pretty nicely. Everything seems to be okay on it now. I've cleaned switches and pots and changed that capacitor. Just got to glue that capacitor down. I think next thing is I'm going to reassemble the front panel, put the speakers in, solder those piezo tweeters back in. Hear my neighbour shouting at the football. Can you? It might be an interesting look, but it does help if you put the grills in first. I've got to redo that, you idiot. There we go, finally got it right. Yeah, not perfect. As I say, the chrome isn't quite as good as I would have liked, but it is what it is. The whole point of this is that it lives another day rather than being landfilled. I was trying to think of something that would tape this wire down here because it's definitely flapping about, and I remembered I've got a roll of Tessa tape, which is like a fabric tape. It's supposed to apparently be for wiring looms in cars. I use it sometimes for wrapping around things like the bar above my desk where I've got a camera clamp, because it's kind of good to give something a surface to grip onto, but it's really sticky. Spotted something I'd seen earlier actually, and I forgot. This aluminium panel on top, the glue was starting to go in one side, so I very carefully just pulled it up a touch. I always hate doing that with the aluminium, but pulled it up a touch Done a little bit of super glue underneath. I'm just going to leave this clamp on it. I'm probably going to leave that overnight. And then make sure I'm completely happy with all the innards before I put them back into the front panel. It's getting pretty late here, so that's probably enough for tonight on this, but we'll leave that there. There's one more bit on this I have to do, which I've done once, and it was a pain in the arse when I did it then, and it will be a pain in the arse now, and that's to get that tiny plastic capstan ring, which I've put in this oversized Ziploc bag, back on the front of the capstan, and then I'll need to give the capstan a clean once I've done. So this is either going to go right or it's going to go wrong. Do I think the part is that critical? Probably not. Famous last words. I don't think this is any easier whether you do it with tools or you do it with your fingers. Either way, it's unpleasant to do. By Jove, he's done it. Do you know, that took several attempts the first time I did it. And then let's take it all apart. That feels okay, right. Oh, thank God for that. Okay, then I think we need to attempt to get it back in the casing actually. Actually, no, I haven't done. I'm happy the alignment and everything's fine. I'm more or less happy the speed's alright. I might just put the scope up and put a speed tape on it and just have a proper look. It isn't worth pointing the camera at the scope. You can take my word for it. The speed's absolutely perfect. No worries at all. I'll try and get this back in then. Just being wary underneath of things like the counter reset button and it's like that. Do you know what I haven't done? Put these switches back on. I mean, they go through the top. They don't. Can I finagle those on, I wonder? No, I'm going to have to take it back out. 3 taller ones. And the little silver bit of the stem, the chrome bit of the stem goes right to the bottom on the black switches. That's right. The one on the white switch here is a bit shorter because the white switch stands up a bit more. They're all pointing the right way. They go on once the case is on. Right. Phew, all good. One thing I'm going to do with these little sort of tension blocks on the handle, I'll explain the way they fit in a minute, but a couple of them have got cracked sections at the bottom, so I'm just going to use a little bit of this good old faithful Tessa tape to bond them back together. If I pull it tight, you really have to press this stuff to get the glue to, it's almost like the glue's in bubbles. You have to sort of pop it to get it to bond, so it gets sticky with pressure. which is good in this case because we need it to hold together. You can see there, and it just slides in. Up. Just push them right forward. There should be a bit of tension on the handle, that's right, so it just gives it a clamping force to stop it flopping. Pretty good. Oh, it looks great with the handle. Are you a handle up or a handle down kind of person? I'm definitely a handle up. Here's one of the matching tapes that I found in a separate auction for this, and I've cheated a little bit. The tape inside these shells was not exactly worn out, but it was pretty primitive tape, and I'd got lots of spare old Sky Chromes, well, Cobalt tapes, Type 2s, that I've swapped into this shell, and I've swapped the old silly paper slip sheets, put proper plastic slip sheets in there, so it's an old shell with new tape. Sounding great to me for a little 1984 unit, and it's really cool that it's got the matching tapes, even if, as I say, it's a little bit of cheating going on there, but I think it's all for a good cause. Yeah, cleaned up really nice considering all the faults that I had with it and all the nearlies with it, where the project almost came to a grinding halt. I'm really glad that it's come this far. And next thing I've got to do is wait for a 10 volt power supply, EU power supply. It's currently running off my bench power supply at the moment, as it has been all this time, but it's just a standard 10 volt barrel plug in there, so got one of those coming, so that will be shipped off with it. It'll be packed in what it came in plus a bit more, and its next stop will be my friend in Berlin. So if you've got one of these by any off chance, or you fancy importing one from Japan and having a go, I must mention, I think it's the M7770K is the closest Western equivalent to this model, but it doesn't have the same soft touch mechanism. It's a different mechanism. It doesn't have a few of the features. Of course, it doesn't do the TV sound because that wasn't a thing in Europe, at least. But that's the closest Western model that I've seen, and I did actually find a service manual for it, but the electronics are different, uses a different amp chip, uses a different mechanism, as I say, so it does help with some of the cabinet work and bits like that, but it's not a complete service manual. There probably is a service manual for this model somewhere, but it will be in Japanese. When you're doing English internet searches, things like that just don't really show. Unless you're very, very lucky. So information on this one was very thin on the ground, and it was only when I was well into the project I started finding things like that YouTube video I mentioned. All of this I'll chuck it in the description. Every resource I've got I will put in there. What size of belts and everything I got, I'll chuck it in the description on the off chance that you've got a U4SS. It has to be the SS model. The others have different features. But hopefully this video, that's about an hour and a half long, I think, by this point in the edit, has been of some use or entertainment to you. So next stop for this radio, Berlin.